Welcome to The Family Business, a podcast about football and life from the perspective of a coach and his daughter. I'm Stephanie Turner, and I'm here with my dad, Norv Turner. Today, our guest is a dear family friend of ours. He and my dad were assistant coaches together at USC in 1982. They then coached together at the Cowboys and then later at the Miami Dolphins. My brother Scott was on his staff at Pitt. His wife, Jan, is my mom's bestie. Our families have been on trips and weddings and road games together. Welcome to the podcast, Coach Dave Wannstedt.
Thank you, Steph. Norv,
thanks for coming on. Right. Well,
of course, Steffi mentions Nancy and Jan are besties. I don't think they think we can do this without them here. They think there's a couple extra chairs. They could do all the corrections, make sure we don't misspeak.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's
like
why we don't talk.
Like they've
we
been
get all the
for
news.
The last 45 years.
Right. Exactly. No.
So you guys started, as we said, 1982. You met. Any tidbits you want to throw in from that first meeting, or when you guys first started working together, and how that relationship started?
Well, the one thing that Jan always reminds me and Nancy of is we had a staff outing in Palm Springs, and we told Dave and Jan we would drive, and we picked them up, and we had gotten a little cheese plate, and a couple bottles of wine, and I'm probably not supposed to say this, but we drove to Palm Springs, and
it was only an hour drive, Norv.
We had a little wine, a little cheese party on the way, and that cemented our friendship. They said, yeah. Well,
all right,
we're good.
Yeah, I would agree. I I was at Oklahoma State with Jimmy Johnson and Tony Wise and all those guys, and we got together one night, and Jimmy said, he says, let me tell you guys something. We went to the Independence Bowl, and Jimmy said to us, Norv, he says, listen, guys, you guys are doing a heck of a job. He says, but those guys down south, Switzer and Oklahoma, we cannot recruit them. We cannot coach them. We cannot cheat them. He says, we can't beat these guys. So if you guys want to leave and look for other jobs, I'm with you. So there was an opening at USC, and Frank Fox, you remember Frank and Norv? Frank was good friends with Ted Toner, and Frank recommended me for the job. So I went out and interviewed, and Ted offered me the job, and I knew nobody. Jan knew nobody. We got in our car with our two kids in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and we drove to Southern California. And when we got out there, I knew nothing about it. And the first real time that we said, there's good people here, and boy, this is going to be really enjoyable and fun, is when we made that trip with Norv and Nancy and went out there, and Norv invited
when you drove to Palm Springs with drinking wine and cheese. Yeah. That's when you said, hey, this is going to be a great time. I think we're going to.
But if Norv and Nancy didn't invite us, we would have, because nobody else did. And we didn't know anybody on the staff. So, we were going to go. Obviously, it was a staff function, but we were just going to drive out by ourselves. And that stuck with us to this day. It really did.
All right.
The biggest thing, and Dave and I have been fortunate to be around great football players and great teams, but Coach Ted Toner got the job, and the first year was a struggle, and everyone's getting used to each other, as Dave said, and it was a team that was very, very young, and we struggled. The next year, we went to the Rose Bowl. We beat Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, and Dave was coaching the defense, and I was coaching the offense. And it's amazing how you remember plays, but they were really a good team. Keith Byers was their running back. He broke off a run. Remember, he broke off a run early in the game, about a 60-yard run. I mean, it might have been 90 for all I know. But he ran down, and Tim McDonald, the great safety who played for the 49ers, played at Arizona, number 1 pick, tackled him on about the 4-yard line, knocked him out of bounds, and we held him to a field goal. And that was the difference in the game. We beat him 21-17 or something. And Dwayne Bickett, who was a first-round pick, Jack Del Rio, who was a first-round pick, were on defense, Tim McDonald. And we had a quarterback who was a surfer. Our starter had gotten hurt, and Tim Grain and Tim and Jack Del Rio were the MVPs of the game. That was one of my great remembrances.
They had, remember, Tom Zach, Chris Carter started that game.
Chris Carter was a freshman.
Chris Spielman, I think, started at middle linebacker.
He did.
He was a freshman too, I think.
Yeah.
No, they had a on paper a lot better team than we did. No question. They were talented.
Yeah.
But
and then you're saying, and then how many years later were you guys back in that Rose Bowl?
Well, that's the thing. It was 8 years later, because that was 84, and 8 years later, we're
coaching the Super Bowl,
getting ready to play the Bills in the Super Bowl in the same stadium.
That's right.
It's the greatest.
I didn't think about that.
It's the greatest stadium in the world. I mean, to play those type of games. I mean, there's 100,000, and the Rose Bowl is incredible, and obviously the Super Bowl is just multiply it.
So then, you guys reunite in Dallas, and Dad, you came in as the offensive coordinator. Dave, you were there. And tell us, this documentary came out. We talked about it a little bit with Jason. He hasn't watched it at all. You guys both contributed to it, right? And what are your thoughts on the Netflix documentary? We have our thoughts of what they missed.
I got it. First of all, I'm glad you acknowledged that we coached there, because I think there's some people down there who forget we were even there. and the one thing I will say, that I was with the Rams, and there was an opening in Dallas, and I was close, obviously, extremely close with Dave and Tony Wise, and I'd met Jimmy several times. They had all come out to training camp one year at the Rams, but Dave and Tony got the deal done for me to get to Dallas, and it took a little while. It took some convincing and the whole deal, but I owe that to them forever. That was you don't get opportunities like that very often, and that was an opportunity that was presented to me because of your persistence, your guys' persistence.
Well, I had been up to that point. Jimmy and I started as assistants together, so we were together a long time. And before that, and when the opening started, Jerry was bringing them all these outstanding coaches that had won Super Bowls, and they were all older guys, been in the league, and great coaches, and we didn't know any of them. Jimmy didn't know any of them. It's NFL stuff was new to all of us, and we were one night we were out drinking. He says, "Boy, what do you think about him? And what do you think about him?" And I says, "Jimmy, you're missing the boat on this. What do you want to do?" "I want to run the ball." Then that's when Norv's name came up, and I says, "Don't you always want your people, your kind of people? He's our people." That was the conversation. But the best part was, so we get the interview set up, and Norv comes in. This is a classic. And, Norv's asking me, how much tape should I bring? I mean, he wants the job, obviously. And I've got my playbooks from, 10 years ago, and I got all my stuff ready. I said, "Well, Norv, I don't know if it's going to be that type of interview." "Well, I want to be prepared." "Well, do what you got to do to be prepared. But, this is, it's a little different deal here with us." So Norv comes in, and you meet Jimmy, the way I understand it. And then Jimmy turns and says, "Hey, Dave, let's go to Campese's Italian restaurant down in Dallas."
Uh-huh.
He says, "Grab Tony, and Norv will ride with me, and we'll meet you down there." So I'm thinking, let's say it's 5:00. I'm thinking, well, what time are you going to, Norv? God, you're going to be sitting down with them. What time And he says, "Oh, we'll be there in about 40 minutes." So I said, "Tony, we got to get going to beat them down there." So Tony and I get the table, and Norv comes walking in, and Jimmy has his Heineken there. They had it ready, or I did, or Tony did, and he grabs it, and I think he turns and says, "Well, we got ourselves a new offensive coordinator." I mean, it was like an hour later.
The interview took place in Coach Johnson's Corvette, driving through Campese's in traffic.
That was it.
He liked the fact that I like to run the ball. That's for sure.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Jimmy always said I thought we were hiring a quarterback coach, for Troy and everything, and I get a guy that can run the ball, likes to call runs.
Oh, beautiful. We had a lot of fun. Oh God, a lot of fun there. Yeah, people talk about even though, I don't know how you are, Norv, but, I've been once in head coach in college, a couple of times in the NFL, and people say, I think the most fun I had was at Dallas because we built that thing from one win, the worst team in the league, to the best team in the league. And God, our players were so fun to coach. We could coach those guys as hard as we wanted, which we did. I mean, thinking of and then Friday nights we were out beers and nachos and the wives and having a hell of a time So, I mean, it was a combination of hard work and a lot of fun and obviously winning a lot of games, Super Bowls,
Yeah. And you think that was it the group that was unique? I mean, sometimes it's like not everybody connects in that way. And this was just the right people at the right time, the right players. And do you think that's what it was that made it?
What do you think, Norv?
Well, me coming in, there was one thing that Dave has already alluded to it, is that Jimmy had his guys. And those guys, a bunch of them at Oklahoma State, came in. Then they came in from Miami. They'd been together. They knew each other. I was amazed that first year sitting in the staff room and sitting around the table, and these guys would give each other a tough time. And Joe Brodsky and
oh yeah, yep.
It was just a group that you could tell cared a lot about each other and knew how to work and knew what you had to do to win. And Jimmy provided that. And there were some times it wasn't a lot of fun with Jimmy, but he made it fun when he needed to. And to me, Steffi started this by asking about the documentary, and I watched about 3 episodes, and then I'd had enough. But that's what. It's not a football documentary. It was a documentary for Jerry Jones, and that's what is missing in that documentary. All the guys that contributed to that team winning and the work, the training camp in Austin, practicing in Dallas in 100-degree weather. And, Thursdays we would do a 2-minute drill at the end of practice, and you thought it was a game. I mean, it was a war. I mean, it was a war. The defensive line are teeing off, and the offensive lineman and Troy's cussing at somebody. And, I mean, it was – when we had those 2-minute drills, I said, the game's going to be easy. We're going against these guys. The game's going to be easy.
Yeah, I mean,
I took the documentary the same way. I mean, and the football part was missing, and then there was a lot of stories that you know how it is that I talked about a draft story, and I know I talked to Jimmy about the trade thing, and he called me and says, "What did you tell him about the Herschel thing?" And I said, "I told him the truth, what will happen." And so I mean, it's
just a lot of stuff that they didn't quite get right, or that they changed around. Yeah.
Well, people ask me, I said, well, it's entertaining. I know a lot of young people are going to see it because they don't know the story, but there's a lot of fiction in this in this story. There's no one there to fact check it, and it needed to be fact checked.
Yeah. There were, I mean, I was surprised that they didn't really talk about the defense as big of a, important part of those teams as the defense was. Like there wasn't a ton of focus on it.
No.
So that was a big thing that I thought was missing.
Yeah, and I mean, we did have the top defense in the league that year, in about 5 categories. But and what's interesting, we got Charles Haley, but he didn't go to the Pro Bowl the year or two before that, so we didn't have a Pro Bowl player on our defense. I mean, we were young, and those guys did a great job. I mean, all the way across the board, and yeah, anyway, it is what it is, but
Yeah.
But the thing that I thought, and Steffi said didn't talk about the defense, but the thing that made that defense was that core group of guys. Ken Norton, Darren Woodson was a first or second year player. The defensive front, there's 7 or 8 guys. I mean, Tony Tolbert, think about what a great player he was. And it's like I say, it's like he didn't play there. It's just so many of those guys that, were
absolutely
so great. And honestly, that a lot, there's 3 or 4 guys that got all the attention, but that's how we won. I mean, that's how we won going down and knocking the ball loose on a kickoff, intercepting the ball in the 4th quarter, all the different things that everyone had a chance to contribute. And that's why, Steffi asked, well, why do you think these guys cared so much about each other? Because they all got a chance to contribute and all got a chance to be part of it.
Absolutely. No question about it. No
Mm-hmm.
question. Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing, I think when they went on to talk as the documentary unfolded and as the episodes got later, I know you didn't get to this part, Dad, but when they talk about Barry Switzer coming in and they talked about like how it was so different because of Barry, and obviously it was, but I think they missed the pieces that like, Dave, you left, and then my dad left. And then obviously the structure of those teams were the same because the coaches that replaced you guys were the similar system or the same system, but that changes the whole dynamic and Jimmy being gone, they just made it about like, oh, Jimmy left and now Troy doesn't have Jimmy. And now like they kind of simplified those things, and having grown up in it and remember those sequence of events, I'm sitting there watching it like, you're not even talking about the reason why these things are different and why the players maybe were acting the way that they were and why the dynamics changed. And that was something that I think that.
Yeah, from a football standpoint, I mean, there's still the key ingredients. Ernie Zampese, who Jimmy had hired when I left, but Butch Davis, who had worked with Dave, and when Dave went to Chicago as the head coach, became the defensive coordinator, and Joe Avisano. Those 3 guys coached the football team, and you talk to any of the players, and it's clear those guys coached the football team, and that's why they were successful.
And Jerry obviously wanted to be involved and control it more, which he got. I mean, he got what he wanted, and as the owner, that's his prerogative. So it wasn't going to be an outside guy at that point. I mean, he knew the talent that he had, so he was going to get somebody that he could voice his opinion on everything, and he would be comfortable with it. And Barry fit the bill.
Yeah. So that's a good segue into talking about owners and different owners. And you guys have both been head coaches for different owners and for different teams. I think something that, being a coach's kid, I get asked questions about like, well, what was this like? Or what was that like? And people have a curiosity about the league. And one thing that I always say to people is every team is a privately owned organization, is a privately owned business. And those owners get to decide how they run their business. That comes down to the type of food they order and provide for the team, the hotels the team stays in, like all of those decisions are determined by whoever is owning that team. And obviously, it also goes into the football decisions. Who's in charge? Who has final say? Do they have a GM that's separate, or a head coach that's a head coach and a GM, or making those GM decisions, final decisions. So I always think that's really interesting when you look at teams and you look at head coaches that have success or don't have success, and think about how much of that is being influenced or determined by the owner's involvement or lack of involvement. And just anything you guys want to think, share or stories or thoughts on that.
Yeah, Dave and I, we both coached multiple teams, and my first experience when I went to Washington, one of the big reasons I chose Washington was because of Jack Kent Cooke. And he, at the press conference, he said Norv's going to be the coach as long as I'm alive. And Troy called me and said, Norv, the guy's 80 years old. I mean, that's not much of a guarantee. But he passed away after my third season. And each year we had gotten better. And for a year and a half, 2 years, it was up in the air what's going to happen. A team was for sale. Jack Kent Cooke's son was trying to buy the team. Well, Dan Snyder ends up buying the team. And we had developed, in 99, we won the division. We were second in the league in total offense. We had developed into a good team and had brought it back. Well, Dan buys the team, and next thing you know, he wants all these changes. He wants to be the guy making all the decisions, and we dramatically regressed because here's a guy that was 32 years old who didn't have a football background. He was a fan, and he listened to Tony Kornheiser and all the writers, Mike Wilbon, and all of a sudden he wants to go in and make all these changes and sign older players and do all those things.
Well,
so
players that he thought were stars, even though they were at the end of their career, and let's get this guy. And
yeah, so your owner, hopefully they're not in a day-to-day situation where they want to run the football team, because there are few that are capable. And then you hate to be this way, but you want them to be supportive, but you don't want them to try to run the team.
Yeah, I think, playing off of Steph's point of the owners, I was, not many people even know this, but I don't even know if I put it on my resume. I have to check that. But when I was at the University of Miami, the Steelers called up and they had a linebacker job open. So I went up and Jimmy was great about it because I told him I wanted to get in the NFL. So I went up and interviewed and with Coach Chuck Noll, spent 2 days up there. I mean, you're talking about detail now. Wow. And so the last question he asked me, he says, hey, who do you know in the NFL? Can I call somebody that head coaching wise? And I would always go to Cleveland's camp with Marty Schottenheimer because he was a Pitt guy. And I would always go to the Dolphins training camp because we were at the University of Miami and we would just drive up and watch their mini camps. So I said, you can call Coach Shula. I've been to all his camps. And they said, okay. So I go to the payphone at the Pittsburgh airport, and I call up.
Were you using your University of Miami credit card in that payphone, or were you using quarters?
Not until we went to the Orange Bowl. Then we got a credit card. But so I called Coach Shula's office, and the secretary, and I says, hey, Coach, I just interviewed for a job. If I want to get in the NFL someday, and I used you as a reference. And if Coach Noll calls you, appreciate if you help me out. Okay, Dave, no problem. Don't you know the next day, phone rings, it's Coach Shula. He says, hey, Dave, do you hear anything in Pittsburgh yet? I said, no. He says, why don't you come up my office tonight? I want to talk to you. So I drive up. It's a 20-minute drive, from where, and he offers me the linebacker job. And he says, I can't offer you the coordinator's job, be a linebacker job. They were running a 3-4. He says, but I want to transition to a 4-3. I was just happy to get the NFL. And my point of the story is, and then Jimmy gets the job a month later and I leave and go to Dallas. But the story is, the first night we were talking, he says about college, he says, the biggest difference, Dave, between college and the NFL? And I said, no. He says, okay. He says, three most important people, okay, in the NFL. Number one, your owner. Number two, your owner. And number three, your owner. And he says, don't ever forget that. And I haven't. And I've used that a lot on a lot of young coaches that get these jobs. And I'm talking to them, you know how it is, Norv. And they say, what do you think? Can you give me any advice? I says, yeah, let me give you some advice. Know who the three most important people are. Yeah, it's mine was a little different at Chicago. The McCaskies to this day, I go up there. I get carte blanche up there. I mean, they treat me. I do bear shows, and but they were, George Hallis obviously started this whole thing, and they had no outside income. So the money they made back then was all they had, and they was about 6 kids and 100 grandkids. So they were cutting that pie a lot of different ways. And so they were, I mean, Mike Ditka said that they threw quarters around like manhole covers. Okay, in other words, they weren't going to spend any money. So I got caught up in that a little bit. We had won a playoff game with Steve Walsh. Our quarter Eric Kramer was hurt, and we wanted to sign Steve back, and his agent wanted him back, Marvin Demoff, and the Bears wouldn't spend the money. So we lost him. I lost about 4 players because they wouldn't spend the money on him to re-sign him. And eventually, that was kind of the beginning of the end, to quite honest with you. But so every owner, I would say, and team is a little bit different. If you get a good one, they can make the difference. That's for sure.
Yeah. And what would you say is a good one? Like, how would you define like the perfect owner head coach relationship?
Wayne Huizenga was about as good as I think you could have. He was fantastic. When he hired me, threw the keys on the desk and he says, here's the keys to every office in this building. Hire who you want, fire who you want, just win. And I brought in George Payton and Rick Spielman to do the personnel. And I hired whoever I wanted. I did whatever I wanted. And we would have our meetings, and he was there, and he was always supportive. And then I got caught up in a thing. Year 4, he brought Dan Marino in as I don't know what his title was, and he called me in. We went 10-6, and he basically said, "God bless his soul, Wayne." He says, "Hey, I'm going to extend your contract, but I'm going to bring Dan in and make him." And I said, "So am I reporting to Dan? Is that what you're?" And he, no. You'll have a good rapport. Well, Dan, they were golf buddies, and Dan had his ideas. And long story short, we started off bad. We had a hurricane. Ricky Williams went to smoke dope, in India or wherever the hell ever he went. And as Norv knows, he had Ricky. He was a big part of our offense, and that was a dagger in our soul, boy. So we start slow, and the owner now all of a sudden wanted to get involved and make changes and start a certain quarterback who I wasn't going to do it. So we became overnight. It went sideways like that, and for a lot of different reasons, But that's kind of what happened there. But Wayne Huizenga, my first 3-4 years there, he was outstanding. He really was.
Should we talk about those Ricky days? Remember those in Miami Ricky Williams days?
Yeah.
I remember Ricky, and I'd go to Bahamas because we were so close. Jan and I would go over there, and they're all Dolphin fans over there, right? So close. So I would be checking into the hotel, and the guy would up and say, Coach, run Ricky up the middle, man. Run Ricky. I said, Ricky's running up the middle more than anybody else in the NFL.
Isn't that the truth?
He got some carries.
Yeah,
in those days.
He was that first year when I was there, and we signed Ricky, and that's one of the great seasons. And unfortunately, as Dave says, he got caught up in some other things, but he had 1,800 yards rushing. He had another 450 yards receiving, and the thing that got us, and that's what I thought you were going to say about Coach Shula. I thought he was going to say the owner, and the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
we
yeah.
had a really good football team, great defense, and we could run the ball, and with Jay Fiedler, we were effective in the passing game, and he broke his finger. We were 5-1. He broke his finger, and the next year,
that's right. We beat Denver on that Sunday night game. We were the best team in the AFC. Some people thought we were the best team in the league. Remember that?
yeah.
And you're exactly right. And Jay broke his hand or finger and missed 6 weeks or something like that. Remember? And we weren't ready with our backup. He couldn't. It was tough deal.
Well, both years he missed 4 or 5 games, and during the stretches he played, we were like winning 70% of our games. I mean, we were going to win, and we won 10 the second year.
Yeah.
And it just unfortunately, and I tell people Jay Fiedler was really a good player, and they go, "What?" And I said, "No, go look at his record.
Yeah.
He was really a good player."
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have our famous family Ricky Williams story where Drew was in middle school. Drew, the youngest in our family, was in middle school, and it was a Friday, right?
It was a preseason game. Yeah.
Preseason game, and you guys got done early, and everyone goes their separate ways. And Ricky says, "Norv, what are you gonna do?" And he says, "You tell him."
Well, it was the day. It was the day of the preseason game, and we had to be at the stadium like at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock for 8 o'clock, whatever it was. And it was, we had our meeting and everything. It was probably 1 o'clock, 12:30, 1 o'clock. And he says he was living down in South Beach, and he goes, "What?" He had two houses, one in Fort Lauderdale, and he goes, "Well, what are we supposed to do?" And I said, "Well, guys are going to go get some rest and then go to the game, He goes, "Well, I don't want to go all the way to South Beach." I said, I live 1.5 miles over here. Go over and give him the number, the address or whatever. And I'm stuck around and doing some stuff. And I come home, and my nieces were there, they go, "Ricky Williams is here." Ricky Williams is here. And Drew's in the 7th grade, our son, Steffi's brother. And I go in, and they've pulled the mattress from under the bed that they had an extra mattress. And Ricky's laying on that on his stomach with his feet in the air with the Nintendo control in his hand.
PlayStation or something playing with Drew.
Drew's up on the bed with the same stance, and they're jabbing back and forth, talking. And they're playing this game. I said, "What's going on in here?" "Oh, we got a little game going, Coach. We'll be good."
Hilarious.
Yeah, Ricky was great. When he first showed up there, he didn't realize that it rained, in the evenings in Florida like it does. So our security guy came to me, and he was driving about a $300,000. I don't know. It wasn't a Porsche. It was more, Jaguar or Aston Martin or something. And he says, "Tell Ricky he should put his hood up when he parks, because he comes out every morning and he opens his door and the water runs out and he gets in it and dry." So I said something to him. He says, "Oh, okay."
Put the top on your car.
Oh, he was a classic. Yep, absolutely.
So there's a handful of first-year head coaches in the league this year, and just kind of wanted to talk to you both about what's that experience, taking over a team. Obviously, every situation is a little bit different. But just from your experience, what is that mindset going into it, and some of the struggles that you face taking over a team that, hey, if you're the new guy there, they probably didn't have a great year the year before, right? Someone just left. So just anything.
Well, I think that Dave and I had similar situations, because we went from a great team to a team that there's a reason the job's open. There's a reason the head coach is not there anymore. And I liken it to really what's happening in Chicago right now. Ben Johnson left Detroit, gets the opportunity, he has the pick of his choice in the job, and he goes to Chicago, and you assume, hey, everything's in place and we're gonna be fine. We're gonna get going. And what you find out that these places are different. And we, now the word is culture. I don't think they used the word culture back in when we were doing this, Dave, in the 90s. But you go in there and you realize you're starting from ground floor. You're starting from scratch. These guys don't understand. They don't know your systems. They don't know how you want to practice. They've not been exposed to the things that you believe in. Dave and I were really fortunate. I worked for two guys, John Robinson, who, won multiple, obviously Super Bowls, had great teams, national championship, coached the Rams and went to playoffs 5 out of 7 years, whatever, a couple championship games. Dave, worked for Jimmy at Miami, national championship, go to Dallas. Those guys know what you expect. So you're starting from scratch. And I think it's showing up in Chicago from things I've seen that it's going to be a process. And when you're young, I don't necessarily think you understand that how big a job it is until you get right in the middle of it.
Yeah, it's I think the players are a little different now. Talking to the guys, and Scott, your son, would be able to tell you more than I'm saying, but it seems like everything now, there's a player problem for the head coach, go through the agent. We used to call Zach Thomas in and say, "Hey, Zach, we got to do this. We got to deal with this," or whoever it was. I mean, I got a problem with this. How are we going to handle this? Even with Ricky. And nowadays, everything is call my agent. Call my agent, or don't call the player. Mm-hmm. So that and the other thing, and I told Ben Johnson this when I was up where we were talking about. He was great. And I said, when I got the Bears job, I went out and played golf with Coach Knoll, Chuck Knoll. And on every hole, I was asking him a question. And at the end, we were sitting there having a few beers. And he said, Dave, he says, just remember, why did the Bears hire you? And I said, for my defensive expertise. And he says, the first year, you put everything, you do it. You put everything you can to make the defense improve. That's why you got the job. Mm-hmm. Then you start worrying about everything else. Don't go in there and try to put out all the fires. Focus on that. And I tell these young coaches that hey, go in there. Why did you get hired? Well, that's the better thing that everyone's going to be looking at first. You better go in there and make some headway in that area. And I think Ben Johnson will. I think he's going to get Caleb Williams playing better and the offense playing better. So we'll see. That's a good example, Norv, that you used there, because, right now everybody's wondering, what's the deal?
When you're young, we all have a lot of confidence, and you've had success, and you think, I'm going to get this thing going now. Well, it is a process, and I'm glad I wasn't there, but you guys went to Dallas from Miami from winning national championships, and the first year in Dallas, you're 1-15, and people are saying, well, can these guys coach, or what's right. going on? And the reality is, there's a reason that job was open. There's a reason, you had the opportunity to go do it. And you have to, that's the worst thing right now is it is hard in the world we live in for anyone to have patience. And obviously that's a great example where you have to have patience. And we can name a bunch of other examples where the guys who are patient and, trust and believe in each other, they get over the hump and they turn the thing around.
Mm-hmm. The other thing too, back in the day, the owners, you didn't get an interview for a head coaching job unless you were a coordinator on a team that was a playoff team. Mm-hmm. And most of the guys that were getting the head coaching jobs were coordinators. And I remember at the time talking with one of those owner meetings, and Artie Rooney and I are good friends from Pittsburgh, and he was a year behind me at Pitt. In fact, when I was up there for the U.S. Open this year, him and I had lunch, and down there in Pittsburgh. But years ago, we were talking about that. And the thing that owners used to like to see is a history. I mean, they could look at me calling defenses for 10 years if you wanted to go back to my college days, and then Dallas. They could do the same thing with Norv. And that's the one thing, if I'll keep the topic on Ben Johnson, that I do like. I mean, we saw him call plays for 3 years at Detroit, and the guy he can dial up plays, So I feel good about that. Where you see some of these guys that get these jobs that have never won a game, never been to the playoffs, hadn't had any success except they were a quarterback, and their quarterback had a good year, and now they're a head coach. So, the hiring not practices, but the hiring, what word am I looking for? The credentials,
criteria,
the criteria, to get a job has changed a little bit too.
It's kind of everyone's in a rush to beat the other guys to this young guy. It's probably a little bit McVay. It started with him a little bit.
Yep.
And there's probably some other examples. But it's funny because I'm watching the Chargers play the Raiders on Monday night, and the defense coordinator has done a great job with the Chargers, and he's been this is his second year in the league. They're 2 games in, and they're really playing good defense. And I think it was Orlovsky who knows what he's going to say. They're saying this guy has shown he's going to be a really good head coach. He's going to be a future head coach. And I'm thinking, it's 2 games into the season. I mean, give me a break. But everyone, whether it's media, whether it's, the teams, they want to rush to judgment. They want to, be the first guy to declare this. Say, I knew that. I said it in September, Give me a break. There's a lot of football to be played.
Jeff Hafley, Jeff's going to be in the same boat. Jeff will get him a head coaching job, I mean, Green Bay, they're going to play good, and he's already getting those same conversations. Absolutely. That's
and Jeff is worked for Dave and was at Pitt with Dave and everything. And he's got a track record. He's been a head coach in college. He's been a coordinator. He's got you can make a case.
He has the history that you can go back and look at. And,
no question. Yeah.
And I think there's this conversation that you hear in the league, or in the commentating and around the league, that the league or teams are failing to develop young players, particularly young quarterbacks. And to me, when I hear that, I think, if you hire a new head coach and you fire him 2 years later, and you have a young quarterback, it's some of this patience thing that we're talking about. Like the teams that we're talking about of the 90s or this other, older era of football, they stuck with it. You guys in Dallas, we're talking about 1-15. Like you had to put the pieces together to build that team and to bring in the right people to develop. And I think that comes into play when they talk about, this quarterback struggled because he had 3 different coaches and this changed and that changed and he was never properly developed by the coaches. And it's like, the coaches can't develop you if you get fired, or
right.
if the owners. So I think there is this, like, that's a good point that you brought, Dave, is like the criteria of these guys getting hired isn't maybe what it used to be. And then there isn't the patience. You hire someone because you think they're great, but then if you realize they're not, you kind of already committed to this person. So what do you know what I mean? Like you can't, if you fire them, you're hurting the whole thing.
Yeah.
But
the one thing I'll say, I thought about it when you were talking, and I know you well enough to know how you believe and what you believe in coaching a defense and coaching a team is what I believe in coaching an offense and coaching a team. What's happened to me in a lot of the league, everyone's depending on making the perfect schematic decision, blitz, coverage, whatever it be, run the ball, zone read, do this. And any young guy or any coach, and I get calls from people and I spend time with people. The number one thing I would say to them, and you would say the same thing, just understand when you're putting your game plan together, when you're putting your situation sheet together, it's about players. It's not about plays. Yep. It's about players. And you know who your best players are. You know what their strengths or weaknesses are. You've got to use your ability to understand that and then use those players. And it's too many people want to go to, well, we got this play and we haven't run it yet. And we're, John Robinson say, why do you want to run that? We're not any good at it. You know, let's right. Pick out the things we're good at and do them, because there's plenty, and there's nothing wrong with repeating a play now and then. And Dave, you're the best at knowing, hey, here's what we're good at on defense. You used to tell me, hey, when something breaks down, we know why it broke down. We're not running 9 million different stunts and blitzes, and all of a sudden the guy pops a run, and everyone's trying to figure out what happened. Why did we knew exactly what happened. This guy left his gap, or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I remember getting ready for that. I've told every coordinator I had this, and we were getting ready for our first Orange Bowl, Fiesta Bowl against Penn State at the University of Miami. And there was a long span between the end of the season and we were playing January 2nd, so we had like a month off. And everybody went recruiting, and I did mine. And I was back in the office starting to put the game plan together. And Jimmy walked by, and I said, we can do this and this. And he grabbed the marker and he wrote big letters, "Don't get bored." And he turned and walked out. Never said a word. and I left it there. And I've told every one of my coordinators, we were giving up about 8 points a game, Norv, right? On defense. So what we were doing was working, and he said, "Don't get bored." And there's something to it. I think that's what you're alluding to,
Yeah.
No question. It just, it's hard. It's a hard lesson for everybody, but sometimes you need a guy like our line coach, Tony Wise, who'd say, I'd ask him, "What do you think?" And for 3 years, he gave me the same 4 plays. I think we should run lead draw and slant and and stretch. And
I was watching a game the other day. It might have been the Pitt game. And I called him and I said, "Do you believe it?" And he says, "Yeah, coach." He says, "Have you seen anybody put their hand on the ground?"
Oh, God.
An offensive line?
Don't get him started on that one.
I was talking about the game and the plays, or a penalty.
And that's what he's focused on.
He was focused on the offensive line at Pitt was not getting in a 3-point. They were doing it all standing up like they do. He says, "Yeah." I said, "Do you believe this, Tony?" I can't. And before I said another word about it, offense, defense, penalty, interference, he said, "Yeah, do you believe it?" "Yeah." He says, "No. Do you see anybody put their hand on the ground?" I said, "Tony, that's the last thing that I was looking at, to be honest with you." And he didn't want to talk about anything else.
That's funny.
It's true.
All right. Well, before we wrap up here, we're going to ask you the question that we ask everybody at the end of a podcast. So we'll ask you our final question. If you didn't work in football, what do you think you would have done?
I know what I would have done. I was taking my test for the FBI, and I had passed the first half of it, and I was studying for the second part. And Jimmy Johnson, and I was at the same time coaching and doing this at night. Mm-hmm. And I met Jimmy at Pitt. We were assistants together, and we went and played racquetball and had a few beers. And he says, "Forget the FBI. You're coming with me and coach." And that was it.
Wow, I can't believe I never knew that.
I
never knew that.
No,
we're doing this.
Yeah.
Back then, the FBI, they were my style. They were kicking doors in, right, and coming through. Okay, they weren't sitting there nor on a computer adding up. Whatever.
Right.
So I think the whole thing has changed. But no, I was excited about that, and I went down. I did the interviews. I did the first part, and I was on my way. I had some good people supporting me, and so I would have been
Wow.
That was the way I was going.
That's wild.
Okay.
Pretty cool.
Well, I think we're glad you are a football coach.
Yeah, so am I. So am I. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, we've had a unbelievable friendship. It goes back 40 years, and
Yeah.
I know Nancy and Jan would have think this would have been a lot better if they were here, but maybe
If we had some wine and cheese.
maybe part 2 will include them. But
Yeah.
There's nothing like that's if the game's changed a lot, and I don't really like it as much as like I'm not an old guy looking back, but I just don't see the players getting pushed and coached as hard as they were back then. But I wouldn't change our opportunity to be in it, and we're fortunate to be in it when we were. And you do develop lifelong friendships like the one we have.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thanks
We'll
for
do it
coming
again.
on. Thank you.
Oh,
We'll
all
talk
right,
to you
Steph.
soon.
Norv, I'll just end up talking to Nancy or Jan, and she'll tell me she talked to Nancy and fill me in on what's going on with you. That's how I get all your information,
Right.
through the girl.
I know.
You know how it goes. So, all right, man, go,
All right.
go Jets, go Jets.
Yeah,
Jets.
Thank
absolutely.
you.
All right.
All right.
Talk to you
see
later.
you guys.
Remember to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on Instagram, X, and TikTok, where we post fun clips and giveaways. We'll see you on the next one.